Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Earthly Headlines. Today we are going to talk about the Elephant Hill wildfire in British Columbia. Now, this happened last year, and apparently it was a human-caused fire. Well, anyway, it doesn't really matter in this. Well, I mean, it does matter. Don't get me wrong, it does matter. But for this case, we're not trying to investigate who started the fire. The fact is, the fire burned up 192,000 hectares of BC's interior. So I got some photos here. So this is Google Earth, not Google Earth. This is Google Maps, and you can see if I zoom out here, this is Vancouver. So just in the American Northwest here, Canadian Southwest rather. You can see where Kamloops is, and then there's the Thompson River here, and then this is the Elephant Hill Park right here. So 192,000 hectares burned down last year. Here's some more aerial photos. This is what was burned up, this brown part, and this is what it looks like now. And yeah, it's right here. The reason why I want to talk about this is because archaeologists, they took advantage of this unfortunate situation, and they basically combed the floor of the forest for previously hidden indigenous archaeological sites. Now, they found a disproportionate amount of these sites compared to just a regular forest with regular canopy and everything. I guess fortunately and unfortunately at the same time, the fire rage, that's really unfortunate, but I mean, there's some silver lining there. That it definitely made it way easier for the archaeologists to find all kinds of different, whether it's small like spearheads or small tools to settlements. What Joanne Hammond says, an independent archaeologist, she says, she hits the nail on the head. She says it provided an opportunity that couldn't be overlooked. They're finding lots of sites all over the landscape, and I think the number of sites is pretty staggering. Yeah, they found around 100 archaeological sites when normally they might find only 20 to 25 in a whole year. So they've quadrupled or quintupled the amount of sites. So they've done like almost 5 years of work in 1 year because of this fire. Now, should they go around burning forests just to find these sites? Of course not. But it is a good, this story is awesome because it's a good example of an opportunistic approach to discovery. And she tweeted this photo out. She believes it's part of a spearhead, and here she goes like recreating it with like Microsoft Paint or something. The other interesting part, aside from the amount of sites they found, were the dates that came out. So this site, Elephant Hill, was occupied 7,500 to 6,000 years ago, and I don't know how they came up with those dates. I think they're going by the geological strata, but they do say that it's conclusively dated 6,500 to 7,000 years ago, and some might be as old as 10,000 years old, which is, of course, a valuable part of the cultural heritage in that area. But if that's true, if it is 10,000 years old, then we've got to think about all the theories that occurred during that time. So 10,000 years ago was around 8,000 BC. And around then, the Younger Dryas had already happened. And assuming that happened, then there must have been humans who were either repopulating the area in their recovery phase, or it was just a barren wasteland, right? But it seems like there are people there not only repopulating, but it seems like they were thriving as well. And you can see this other recovered piece. This is no doubt an arrowhead. This is not some natural... It's not something that nature created out of just like wind erosion or anything like that. I mean, that's a real... You can obviously see... This is a good photo, actually. You can see all the marks that are made from striking it and basically forming it into the shape that it has in this photo. This spear point itself is 8,000 to 10,000 years old. Let's kind of look into exactly what happened. So the Elephant Hill fire burned largely high elevation areas, and unlike low-lying areas home to many of BC's cities, these upland areas have not been as thoroughly explored by archaeologists. So there's something that I didn't know. So the archaeologists, at least in British Columbia, they are looking in the lowlands where all the cities are closer to the sea level. It didn't occur to them, I guess, or I guess they just didn't have the time, or they didn't get around to exploring the upland areas of the higher elevation, which would make more sense for if you were a hunter-gatherer, or if you were a native and your tribe, you would probably live in the upland areas as well. And you'd probably find, from an archaeological standpoint, you'd probably find more in the upland areas just because they're more isolated from civilization, modern civilization. So there's probably a lot more untouched areas in the uplands, and therefore there's probably a lot more stuff that you could find there. So Hammond, she continues, she says her colleagues have generally assumed the dense forest areas had low potential for rediscovering indigenous sites. I don't understand. Why would they rule that out? Why would they rule out the potential just because it's a densely forested area? I mean, if you're an archaeologist and you know that the dates go back that much, even 6,000 years, stuff grows back. I mean, if there are people who live there and then they're gone, their stuff is still there, and assuming their stuff is still there, stuff would just grow over it if it's untouched. So that makes logical sense. So I don't understand how they would come to the conclusion that there'd be low potential. That just seems like they're making excuses. They're showing us that people were really intensively using the land. It wasn't just kind of nomadic, opportunistic foraging. People were at home in the places that we consider the wilderness, the middle of nowhere. This is what I was talking about earlier. There are probably people. If there are people living up there, then you can probably safely assume there are other communities living up there as well. And if what she says is true, they're really using the land, and they're foraging, and they know exactly where everything is. They're not lost in the wilderness. Then yeah, it makes sense that they would live there and then thrive if they had their protocol down of how, in terms of survival and living in a community and having children and just living their lives. And if you find them in the uplands, then that's a huge clue into how they were living in their day-to-day. She continues, it's kind of shifting our idea of what wilderness is and where the middle of nowhere is. All of these places were used. Among the artifacts discovered are pieces of ancient tools dating back millennia, arrowheads, spear tips, knife blades, and axe heads. The sites where those tools have been found include camps for hunting and plant gathering that were in use from thousands of years ago to as recently as 200 years ago. Wow. I mean, talk about ancestral knowledge. I mean, 200 years ago is not that long ago. And they were probably living the same way that their ancestors lived thousands of years before that. I mean, we're talking this. I feel like we're scratching the surface here. I feel like this whole upland frontier in Canada is probably filled to the brim with all kinds of artifacts, and maybe even in Hidden City. I mean, I think about a month ago I did an episode on Hidden City in Kansas. I mean, Kansas in the heartland of the United States. That's like almost right smack dab in the middle, and there was a city there. I mean, in the uplands, or maybe even somewhere else in Canada, it might be even in the lowlands, there's probably a city there as well. That wouldn't surprise me if they found that, if that headline came out tomorrow. Here's another arrowhead. This is actually a knife blade, and it could be between 200 to 1,200 years old. And that's a large gap. They're giving a lot of large gaps. I feel like they're ballparking a lot of stuff, but they did say that it's confirmed. Well, let's continue. We'll see. Hammond believes this post-fire archaeological work is a first for British Columbia. Yeah, if it's a first, then I'd be willing to bank that there's way more stuff out there. She's hoping its success to be used as an example to the rest of the province, and she hopes it becomes part of the standard protocol for for recovery after wildfires. Yeah, that would make sense. If there's a wildfire, they should send in archaeological team after it's cleaned up just to see what's there. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, why not? They send a bunch of other teams out there, so an archaeological team of like maybe 5 or 6 people would be sufficient enough, I would say. The First Nations are co-leading the work, and that's crucial because they have the knowledge and the cultural knowledge and knowledge of the landscape and of their ancestry to really identify, to really help recognize what they're looking at, as opposed to just an archaeologist who has no other ties besides their profession to the land and that area. Hammond believes that between the 5 First Nations, up to 300 or 400 archaeological sites could be discovered by examining the ground beneath the fire's destruction. So I guess the ground underneath well, first of all the overgrowth gets burnt out away, so then you're just left with earth, and then from there you could kind of examine and try to deduce with an educated eye, like an archaeologist or a geologist or whoever, even an anthropologist. They could see and survey the land and then see and deem what would be necessary for further examination, and then go from there. And I think that's exactly what they did. So they say up to 300 to 400 sites could be discovered, and they found 100 already. That's pretty interesting. What do you guys think about this? I can't imagine anyone saying that this is unethical, because it would be unethical if they themselves started the fire. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but if it does turn out to be some crazy conspiracy that they decided to start this fire, because remember, I think there are some rumors of it being human started, but that seems outrageous, and I don't think any archaeologist would ever do that. I don't think it would even occur to them to set 192,000 hectares of land on fire just for the off chance that they can find something. I don't think that's what it is. So just for the sake of the video, we're going to say that didn't happen. But wildfires happen. And if you live in a place like Canada or California is a good example, there's wildfires everywhere. They should probably send an archaeological team to these areas after they're, of course, when they're safe to investigate and see what they come up with. Because obviously it's helping a lot in terms of finding what they need. Finding things that are, things become more obvious. Artifacts become more obvious, obviously, when this happens. So even earthquakes, even after heavy rain, they do this. So fire is not surprising at all either. Even tornadoes come in and they shake stuff up, and stuff gets unearthed and gets shifted and moved around. That would make a lot of sense. I think in Italy, that's how they found, not in Italy, but when they found Troy. For those of you who don't know, the mythical city of Troy was a myth for a long time, until I think around 50 or so years ago, maybe longer. This is all from the top of my head, people, so don't get mad at me. They actually found the actual city of Troy, and I think that they found it partially because there was an earthquake or something. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. So yeah, this is not a novel case. This happens, but in terms of wildfires, that's really interesting that they would just burn it. Everything got burned, and so they can just examine what's left. So let me know what you guys think about this. To me, it's exciting, and I hope they find more stuff. I just hope that they don't try to burn stuff in order to find things in the name of archaeology. I think that would be bad. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.